Hi, good morning, everyone. This morning I'm in conversation with Dr. Claire O'Reilly about virtual exchanges at her institution. But before we start, Claire, please introduce yourself. Tell our viewers what your role is and what your institution is.
Yes, thank you, Lorenza. Good morning and good morning to our listeners. Yes, I am in the German department in University College Cork, and I've been here since 2005 in a permanent role. I teach various subjects from intercultural communication, German history, German-Irish relations, virtual exchange, and I have some responsibilities for a Bachelor of International Business and German program.
We're actually here to focus on virtual exchange at the University of Cork. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, what you do, can you just tell us how long you've been doing virtual exchange and a little bit about the structure? I understand you do it predominantly with a German partner. So explain to us the structure of the virtual exchanges that you do.
Yes, in 2019, a colleague of mine from my previous job in Germany at the Technical University of Chemnitz, uh, Mike Arnold, hi Mike, we were thinking about ways of bringing an element of internationalization into the classroom by doing something collaboratively with our students. We had met on a summer's day in Mannheim and sat down and had brainstormed about ideas and concepts. And little did we know in that summer of 2019 how much this would be really needed. So when yes, and 20 so March 12th, 2020, when our students couldn't go abroad, I reached out to Mike and said, how can we what we've done on paper, how can we look at that? So the idea we came up with was to use the construct of biography and narrative, and how to get students talking meaningfully to each other by means of virtual exchange. Just a passion grew because I could see um, how meaningful and how beneficial virtual exchange was becoming. It was just jumping off the paper and becoming, the classroom was just this little hive of enterprise and reflection, and yeah. So that
I
that
will
was
ask you. I will ask you about the impact of the students because I can see you're very, very passionate about that. I just want to go back. You mentioned through the lens of biography. Can you just expand a
yes,
little bit for our viewers?
yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yes, so I suppose the overall umbrella term would be life writing. Life writing is capturing um, life stories in any nonfiction, any way to gather or reflect on life. It can be blogs, it can be diaries, it can be letters, and a form of life writing is biography. So we started with that umbrella term of life writing, then to biography, and then to narrative and narration. And so we did these concepts. We had the term in UCC starts earlier. That misalignment of semesters happens. So we start deal with these concepts of life writing, biography, to take Katrina Nigul's thought on the use of biography. She calls biography like a looking glass into expression, into identity, into reality. And we found this biography construct to be a looking glass, and where the students were just, they were reflecting on what they were learning about the other students, but they were also reflecting on how they were being seen and received by their partners. So biography has been a wonderful, I suppose, a very insightful tool into getting students to meaningfully um, work with each other, engage with each other, and learn with and from each other.
So Claire, you've got a German partner you've mentioned before. So your virtual exchange is for German students to practice English and vice versa. So your passion about what you saw and what happened to the students, tell us
Yes.
about that, because it was all, it sounds like it sort of grew organically, and it was a sense of kind of desperation. What are we going to do? The pandemic, we can't travel. How can we carry on?
Yeah.
So you obviously worked with someone you knew and you felt comfortable with, and it
Yes.
grew from there. So how has this grown? And tell us about the impact on your students. How many times have you been doing it since 2019 then?
Yes, so we've had four iterations,
Four iterations.
and every time we tweak something, we improve something, we reflect on what's going well, what's not go, what's going, what could be improved. So I suppose the thing that really jumps out at me is that as we teach narration and biography, we get students to think about, to use Rosenthal's idea of lived life and told story. So the students what they had to do was meet at least three times and talk about early childhood, teenage, adolescent years, and their lives since they came to university. And at the beginning, we just saw a real learning curve in terms of students starting out, and even at the beginning, I'm speaking now for my students, but I think Mike would echo this, that how am I going to talk to my student in German or in English? How do I have enough language? So there's a huge level of fear and the unknown, and you're on a digital format. You're within a digital realm that there's huge uncertainty, and from each interview, this increasing level of confidence and, I suppose, comfort with their partner was evident. But just what was happening with from interview to interview, so there was at least 2 weeks. We tried to have a reflection, so an interview reflection within class. O'Dowd, talks about that mentoring role that students really do well to have, that to be accompanied and being mentored as the exchange is going on, and that was a really important space for
Mm.
students to say in that area, this is unsettling me, or this is challenging me. And it was never language, interestingly enough. It was, the very first one we ran, after the first interviews, some of the students said they felt very uncomfortable with some of the early childhood experiences. There was
Oh,
sensitivity, there was
interesting.
disclosure of areas that, you know, so that very quickly led us to really kind of question, what is, they weren't expecting that amount of openness and
Mm.
self-disclosure. And in fact, that has been a running thread right throughout the virtual exchange, how meaningfully the students, they hear, okay, I have to talk about my life. And everybody is open to self-disclose or not self-disclose, but the amount, how deep, how quickly the students actually shared information, personal information, was a real eye-opener for our students, and caused them to kind of reflect, well, how would we do this at home? And actually, it did come up that Irish students felt, would we have been this open if we hadn't been challenged?
But it's that thing about going out of your comfort zone a bit, and
Exactly,
that's when the learning happens. And this is
exactly.
demonstrating exactly that and digging deeper.
Being deeper. Yeah.
So how many, can I ask, in terms of structure, how many students typically do this, and over how many weeks? Because you're talking about them digging deep, but I mean, usually virtual exchanges last a number of weeks. So how many are they working in pairs or groups, and
Yes.
over how many weeks and how many students?
Yes. So the groups are small, Lorenza. So the biggest group we had was 12 students, if I'm not mistaken. The
Seems like a
smallest
nice number to manage, doesn't it?
and the smallest group was four, and that was the first year we ran it during lockdown. And so there's small groups. We tried out different things in terms of pairing. So students we gathered hobbies, and we tried to link students with, so somebody who was interested in rugby, or a band, or we tried to have an overlap of
Common
interest
ground.
at the beginning. And then we did it one year without doing the hobbies, and it worked just as well. And
Interesting.
it
And
was
so over
interesting.
how many weeks though?
So over 12 weeks.
Okay, that's a long one, isn't it?
It's
It's long.
yeah, we hit the road running week one. We meet because the university system, the term with our partner didn't start until mid-October. We had 6 weeks on already done where we did the constructs and we did right from the beginning what is virtual exchange, and we also linked it in with their year abroad. So after the restrictions lifted, now we've had groups coming back from their year abroad, and interestingly, some have said that they've had more meaningful conversations through the virtual exchange using German, using the target language, than they had while on their year
Oh,
abroad.
goodness.
I think it's an interesting development that, they did have conversations in German, of course, while they were living in Germany, but really these meaningful ones. Yeah, what's interesting is I have a student in a module this semester who did the virtual exchange in the winter semester this year, and she mentioned to me last week that she's arranging to meet her partner, that they're linking up again, and
Lovely.
just the amount of friendships, and she's also helping her with her German as she goes forward into doing her oral exam in May. I was very surprised on just to see the amount of the the affinity, the friendship level that was emerging.
So it's
Um,
going beyond the virtual exchange,
beyond.
would you say?
It's and that's I think that's one of the exciting things
Yeah,
about
that's what you want, isn't it? How wonderful is that? Yeah.
this. Exactly.
So before I let you go, Claire, do you have any future plans with your virtual exchange? Any tweaks or anything on the
Um,
horizon you'd like to share
yeah.
with us?
Yeah, so we've been looking at our database for 4 years. The amount of information, you have. We also do ethics approval, Lorenzo, which is an important part, because if you want to reflect on, your projects or the group sessions where we all have we have three plenary sessions. So we have one where we all meet each other. We have one in the middle where we do some concepts together, but we also have one at the end where we all come together and reflect on what the virtual exchange means for each, on an individual basis. We're thinking about looking at self, so the development of self within what is happening. So Metzero talks about transformation being, where one's frames of references are challenged, and where habitual ways of doing things, where one maybe develops new ways of looking at things. I think if we were to take his definition alone, we see evidence, little stepping stones in that direction for transformation in students, but looking to see what actually happens within the students, maybe looking at that with a new lens. I think biography has really has yeah, we see it as a convincing lens through which students can really meaningfully come together and engage and talk, and that's what you want in a digital space, because often digital spaces can lead to students becoming more isolated. um,
Yes.
Actually, this form of virtual exchange where you have the preparation, they have their tasks to do, you reflect and kind of walk with them. I think it really does bring it's the opposite of the social isolation.
Absolutely. It's using technology to bring people together and not isolate them. And that's
We need
exactly
that
what we want.
in
We
this
do need
world.
that. So
We
Claire,
do.
have you managed to pass on your passion to anyone else at your institution, other people doing what you're doing?
I do understand that people look at this with some reticence because, finding a partner, working, there's a lot of work behind the
Oh
scenes
yes.
where you have to, particularly at the beginning when it's all quite new, and you have to be really present and kind of switched on when things crop up. You have to react fast.
Absolutely.
You can't, so I think, I do think I can understand it, but I think like others, who have experience doing virtual exchange, when you see what happens within the classroom, and you know, we self-directed learning is one of those things, isn't it? And connecting to outside spaces. When you
Absolutely.
see what the virtual exchange can actually bring about within the student, it's very hard not to yeah, it's very hard not to be convinced that this is one path forward that you want to encourage and share and talk about. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your passion with the listeners today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lorenza.